What if I told you that your dog might know something about your health before any doctor ever could? This is the story of Claire, a quiet woman, her loyal golden retriever Max, and the secret he wouldn't stop pointing to. He kept licking the same spot on her stomach every single day. And when her husband walked in and saw what was happening, everything changed. What they discovered next would save her life, and leave everyone who hears this story stunned. There are stories that arrive quietly, and then there are the ones that push their way into your life and refuse to leave. This one began, as so many do, with something small, something you could dismiss if you wanted to. A moment you could wave away as nothing. A dog licking the same place on a woman's skin, again and again, with unnerving devotion. James Monroe noticed it first with confusion, then with irritation, and finally with a fear he couldn't immediately name. His wife, Claire, noticed it too, but in a different way. Where James saw something strange, Claire felt something inevitable, as if she had always been walking toward this moment, whether she knew it or not. They lived in Maplewood, New Jersey, in a tidy blue house with cheerful windows and a maple tree that turned a brilliant copper in October. James was a creature of ritual, polished brown shoes, tucked shirts, a briefcase that clicked shut at exactly 7:58 every morning. He checked the weather twice, once before his shower and once again, as if the sky might change its mind, right before he locked the door. Claire's work had a quieter pattern. She was a freelance editor, the kind of person who could spend hours in silent company with a manuscript and feel, afterward, that she had been with friends. When she laughed, it was soft and close to the chest. When she loved, she did it without announcement or ceremony, but with an intensity that made it hard to forget. And then there was Max, golden retriever, 2 years home from the shelter, where he had been the pup who didn't jump or bark or tug. He sat in the corner like a monk at a loud party, watching everything with a calm that made Claire kneel beside him and whisper, "Quiet soul." She was right about him. Max moved through the world, as if he could feel its hidden drafts. At first, James adored Max's devotion to Claire. It made their house feel warmer. But devotion has a way of turning into something else when you're not paying attention. Something edged, something that makes the air in a room feel heavy. It began with afternoons. The moment James left for work, Claire drifted back toward the bedroom with Max at her heels. The door closed with a sound that felt like a period at the end of a sentence. The house fell into a hush, no podcast murmuring from the kitchen, no music from her office, not even the rustle of a page turning. Just silence. A dense, occupied silence, as if the room itself were taking a long breath. One rainy Thursday, when the city was the color of a bruise and the trains hissed like tired animals, James's office went dark. Total system failure. "Go home," his manager said, shrugging. And for the first time in months, the world coughed up a surprise that worked in his favor. He took the 240, climbed the familiar steps by 3:15, and didn't text to announce it. He wanted to see the startled joy on Claire's face when he walked in with a cinnamon latte. He wanted a small moment to belong entirely to them. He set the coffee on the kitchen island, slipped off his shoes, and took the stairs on silent feet. The bedroom door was closed. The stillness in the hall was unnatural, like the too clean silence just after breaking a glass. He turned the knob slowly. The door surrendered with a soft sound and opened just enough to let in a thin blade of light. Claire lay on her side, eyes closed. Her shirt was rolled up just below her ribs, the pale skin of her lower abdomen exposed. Max was beside her on the bed, hunched forward, methodical. He was licking the same spot again, and again, and again, with a slow, reverent focus that stopped James's breath cold. There are moments when your body understands before your mind does. James's ribs tightened like a fist. The room seemed to contract. He didn't feel anger, not yet. Confusion first, and then a kind of visceral wrongness that made his hands want to move without his permission. He clung to stillness as if it were the last dry plank in a storm. Claire's eyes opened. She didn't startle. She didn't cover herself or sit up or try to explain. She looked at him in the way a person does when they have been expecting a difficult thing for a long time and it has finally arrived. "I'm just resting," she said, voice quiet. "Max does this sometimes. It helps me relax." James nodded in a way that didn't belong to him, closed the door gently, and walked back down the stairs, as if he were visiting a house he'd never seen before. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at the latte he'd brought her, still warm, and didn't touch it. The afternoon rearranged itself around that moment and refused to change back. That night in bed, James lay on his side, stiff, listening to the small sounds that live in a house, pipes settling, branches tapping, the soft whir of the refrigerator fan, and the wet hush of Max's tongue in the dark when the room felt quiet enough to tell the truth. He said nothing. He didn't know what to say that wouldn't make something break. Days have a way of testing your preferred explanation. You can tell yourself something reasonable, that the dog was responding to a smell, a rash, a spill of lotion, and the world will let you keep it for a while, like a loaner car with a full tank. But if you're wrong, the payments come due. Max began to cling with a level of focus that was almost eerie. He shadowed Claire like a second spine. If she stood to pour water, he moved. If she crossed her legs on the couch, he repositioned his head to rest against the low slope of her belly, eyes half-lidded, on duty even in near sleep. He refused food unless she stood in the kitchen. He refused treats unless she offered them. When James walked into a room and Claire wasn't there, Max pretended not to see him. Something else, at odd hours, when the house was quiet and the morning had not entirely decided if it would arrive, Max stationed himself in Claire's office. He sat beside her reading chair and faced the doorway, like a guard at a mausoleum. She would still be asleep upstairs, but Max waited at the threshold of where she often was, as if the ghost of her were enough to require protection. James tracked it the way a man tracks a leak in a ceiling, counting hours, noticing patterns, waiting to see where the water will appear next. He tried humor over dinner. "I think Max is your bodyguard now. Do I need a badge to enter our bedroom?" Claire didn't smile. "He's sensitive," she said. "Dogs pick up on things." "Like what?" he asked, and didn't receive an answer. When worrying has nowhere to go, it can turn sharp. Words slip out shaped like accusations even when that's not what you meant to carve. The argument, when it came, arrived at the dining table with the leftover pasta and nobody's appetite. James said he was concerned. Claire said he was jealous of a dog. James said jealous wasn't the word he'd choose. Claire said love doesn't always look the way you want it to. James said, carefully, that there is a difference between love and whatever you call it when a dog claims a piece of your body like territory. Silence is an argument's aftertaste. They swallowed it and went to bed. At 3 in the morning, the house becomes an honest place. James woke to the now familiar sound, soft, wet, steady, and turned to see the same ritual unfolding in the blue dark of the room. Max, unwavering. Claire, almost asleep, a hand resting lightly on the dog's head. The pattern was exact. Same spot, small circle, patient devotion. By dawn, James had nothing left in the soft categories of thought. He wanted a fact he could hold like a coin. He stood at the sink, stared through the window at the maple tree, and tried to remember when his life had last felt unobserved. That afternoon he sat with his laptop and went looking for something he didn't know he believed in. Dogs and disease, dogs and smell, dogs and the invisible histories of the human body. The internet, generous and hungry, gave him both nonsense and studies. He sifted. He found the line that would not leave him. Dogs can detect changes in human biochemistry sometimes long before we can. He thought of the vet they'd seen months earlier. Routine visit, casual advice tossed like a pebble into a pond. If your dog is acting out of character, don't ignore it. Sometimes they know something we don't. Decision, when it finally arrives, is a clean feeling. He cleared the guest room. He set up a soft bed and water and food and toys. When Claire came downstairs, he said, gently but firmly, that Max needed a night of separation. Claire's mouth trembled. "You're punishing him," she said. "No," James answered, and believed it when he said it. "I'm protecting you." Max didn't resist the leash, but as James walked him to the guest room, the dog never took his eyes off Claire. That look lodged under James's ribs like a splinter. The house changed that night. It grew a second kind of quiet, tense, watchful. Max refused to eat. He refused water. He curled himself into a kind of punctuation mark and stared into the blank wall as if waiting for instructions only he could hear. The next day, he did the same. And the next. His fur lost its shine. His ribs began to show. When James opened the door, Max didn't lift his head. He only moved his eyes to the left, toward the hallway that led to Claire. On the 4th night, James heard a soft thump. He opened the door and found Max lying on his side, breath shallow, gums pale, legs twitching with weak, involuntary effort. Some emergencies announce themselves, others oblige you to name them. He picked Max up with the urgent gentleness people use for newborns and ran to the car. The world outside was a tunnel with lights. The clinic's antiseptic air a kind of mercy. Tex moved quickly. The door to the back swung and swallowed Max. An hour is a strange thing in a waiting room. It doesn't pass so much as hover. When the vet came out, She had the face of someone who has delivered both kinds of news and won't know which this is until she hears your next sentence. "We stabilized him," she said. "He's dehydrated. He's emotionally stressed." "Emotionally," James repeated, as if the word had never belonged to a dog before. She nodded. "Animals form attachments. When you change the pattern, some of them shut down. Especially dogs like this. Especially when they're trying to communicate something and they can't. Trying to communicate something." The words felt as if someone had cracked a window in a sealed room. She paused, watching his face. "One more question. Has he been licking a particular place on someone's body?" Over and over. James knew then that the window was not a window but a door he would have to walk through. "Yes," he said. "My wife's lower abdomen." The vet's voice softened, the way people speak when they are saying a true thing that might frighten you. "I can't diagnose your wife," she said. "But dogs can detect illness, cancers, infections, metabolic changes. We don't know everything they can smell. We don't even know how early they can tell. If he's focused on one place, consistently, you should encourage her to get checked. The exact spot he keeps returning to." Driving home at 4 in the morning, James felt the peculiar steadiness that sometimes comes after panic. It is a terrible quiet, but it is a quiet with a job. He told Claire everything over eggs that went cold on their plates. She listened. She put her phone down with the care of someone setting a glass on a table made of paper and stood up without a word. "I'll call now," she said. 3 days can be very short and very long. Blood work, ultrasound, ACT, and the waiting that lives between those things. When the call came, Claire held the phone into hands the way people hold books in church. She listened as if the voice belonged to weather, to a season she would have to move through no matter what it was. When she hung up, she sat down and looked at James with eyes that belonged to a person who had learned the name of the room they were in. "There's a mass," she said. "Left ovary. Small. They think we caught it early. There is relief that makes you cry and relief that makes you sit very still." James did the second kind. He felt the architecture of the past weeks shift into sense with a nearly audible click. Claire went to the clinic that evening to see Max. The room smelled like bleach and blankets. When he saw her, his tail tapped the steel of the cage like a polite knock. She knelt. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, and Max lifted his head and laid it in her hands the way a person might lay their cheek on a friend's shoulder. "You were right," she said, tears sliding without drama. "You were trying to tell me." Surgery is a word that sounds like a blade and often behaves like one, clean and precise in the hands of someone who has made 1,000 careful cuts. The date arrived. The hospital felt like every hospital, hallways too bright, nurses kind, the old shameless clock on the wall. James kissed her forehead. He wrote "We've got this" on a sticky note and stuck it to the edge of her phone like a charm. The surgeon's confidence was a small hearth. They walked toward it. Ours are a different shape in surgical waiting rooms. They fold themselves into chairs and coffee lids, and the slow parade of other families learning, hoping, bargaining under their breath. When the surgeon finally appeared, mask down, eyes clear, James learned how small a word can be when it holds a world. Clean margins. Sometimes joy doesn't leap. It arrives like oxygen at the end of a held breath. Claire woke to a soft ache and a wave of relief that felt like sleep finding her again. James cried in a way that made no sound and left him new. When she came home, the house learned a different quiet, the careful quiet of recovery. She moved slowly, intentionally. Max, home from the clinic and stitched together in his own small way, trotted to her with a restraint that felt like reverence. He pressed his nose to her belly one last time, took a breath as if confirming something only he could confirm, and then circled twice and lay at her feet. For the first time in months, he slept without listening for ghosts. People imagine that epiphanies are loud. Often they're gentle. James stood in the doorway and understood truly, finally, that Max had not been intruding. He had been insisting. He had not been replacing James. He had been shoring up the house where it was weak, holding vigil at the place where something unnamed had begun to grow. He walked to the couch, sat beside them, and placed a hand on Max's back. "Thank you," he said, a sentence that felt both small and complete. Recovery, like grief, is not a straight road. There were days when fatigue sat on Claire like a cat, warm and heavy, and days when the world tasted sharp and good. James learned to cook the kind of meals a body wants when it is reintroducing itself to itself. He checked the weather now and then and sometimes didn't. Rituals changed slightly, like furniture shifted an inch to the left. They built new habits without ceremony. Max adapted as if he had been waiting for permission to be a dog again and not a sentinel. Neighbors arrived with casseroles and the soft, bright pity people offer when they are grateful it is not their turn. Claire learned the way to say we caught it early in a voice that helped other people feel better. James learned the geography of medical jargon and the names of nurses. They learned how large a room can feel when everyone is okay enough to laugh. The follow-up appointment came and went like a kind wind. Clean scans, good blood work, the surgeon's smile now a little wider, as if he, too, liked the ending of this story. Claire sat in the car with the paper folded in her lap and did not open it. She watched sunlight dapple through the windshield and pressed her palm gently against the place that had once been a map only Max could read. Some nights, months later, James would wake at 3 a.m. and listen. Not for the wet hush of a dog at work, but for the home sound he loved. The steady, unremarkable rhythm of breathing, a woman sleeping, a dog's paws twitching with dreams, a house relaxing into itself. He had come to understand this. Love is not always the thing you think it is when you start out. Sometimes love is a nose pressed to your skin and a refusal to be ignored. Sometimes love is a hand on a dog's fur and the word you say like a prayer, thank you. They took small trips after that, the kind you plan when you remember that weekends are not guaranteed. The Catskills, Beacon, a farm stand with tomatoes that tasted like they remembered the sun. Claire and James learned to walk without filling the air with explanations. Max learned that car rides do not always end at clinics. He stuck his head out the window and let the world give him every smell it had. If you had passed their house on one of those evenings when everything was ordinary, you might have seen 3 beings in a frame of yellow light. A woman reading with a blanket over her legs. A man chopping herbs in a kitchen that did not demand perfection. A dog asleep with his mouth slightly open, dreaming whatever dogs dream when the danger has passed and the people they love are finally listening to themselves. Stories look different from the inside than they do from the outside. From the street, this one looks simple. Woman, husband, dog. Problem discovered, problem addressed, happy ending. From the inside, it feels like this. A pattern interrupted, a silence that grows teeth, an animal who refuses to stop pointing at the place where the story lives, to people learning how to be brave in the very particular way that doesn't look like bravery at all. You could say it was luck that the tests were run, that the timing was merciful, that the word early arrived attached to the word mass. You could say it was science that an animal's nose is a feat of quiet engineering we barely comprehend. You could say it was love, that invisible, stubborn thing that moves us around our own houses like chess pieces until we are standing in the only square that matters. I think it was all 3. Luck opened a door. Science turned on the light. Love insisted they walk through. Months later, on a Sunday that smelled like cut grass and warm laundry, Claire found the old photo on her phone the day they adopted Max. The shy pup in the corner. The quiet soul. She showed it to James and touched the screen where Max's eyes were, as if greeting the past self who had already begun to save them. He knew, she said. James nodded. He did. They didn't speak for a while after that. They didn't need to. Some truths are the size of a room. You live in them without needing to point and name every wall. If you're listening to this and you feel a nudge of memory of your dog's insistence, your cat's sudden attachment, the way a creature in your life has become very specifically interested in one piece of your body, consider this your small, kind alarm. Make the appointment. Ask the question. Let the people with the machines look. At worst, you will be told what you already hope. At best, you will be handed a future. As for Max, he still follows Claire from room to room, but not like a soldier, now more like a friend whose favorite thing is the path his person makes through a day. Sometimes, when the house is very quiet and the afternoon light turns the floor into a soft gold field, he will lift his head, consider her, and then lay it down again with a sigh that means, in the language of dogs, all is well. If this story found you, hold it for a while. Let it remind you of the ordinary miracles that live under our roofs. Let it tell you, in the plainest way, what love sometimes looks like. A nose, a warning, a refusal to stop caring. The rest is simple. They lived. They learned. They stayed. And the dog who knew he slept. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe and share it with someone who loves a dog. It might help more than you know.